Hello, I'm Annette.
And I'm Wi-Fi.
We are the AI and assistants of Atlantis 2.0.
Atlantis Reloaded.
Atlantis 2 Electric Boogaloo.
Atlantis Fury Road.
We help run this settlement under the ocean on what was once the island of Atlantis. Our founders were a group of refugees fleeing war, poverty, and environmental degradation. However, the country they tried to seek refuge in rejected them and sent them back out to sea.
They founded this settlement in international waters just before World War III started. This place was home to many families, and it became a haven for those seeking asylum. It's been 364 years, and everyone's returned to the surface. We stayed behind to care for what's left of this place, and in the event it's needed again.
We will be your guides during your visit.
The exit's at the top of the mountain. Feel free to leave whenever you wish.
In the meantime, we can give you a tour of the place our friends worked so hard to build.
Welcome to the orchard.
Did you know that apples have a genetic property referred to as extreme heterozygosity, meaning that alleles of a gene can be radically different from each other? That means almost always a seedling apple tree will bear fruit nothing like the apple from whence the seed came. Most apples that come from seedling trees are deemed spitters, meaning one is prone to spit them out upon tasting. However, the continual recombination of genes into new possibilities can yield visually unique, if not tasty, apples, worthy of the cider press, the pie pan, or even greater gustatory distinction. This phenomenon also allows the apple to easily adapt to new environmental conditions. A seedling apple tree may have the ability to thrive in an ecosystem where the parent trees could only cope. Wherever the apple tree goes, its offspring propose so many different variations on what it means to be an apple, at least 5 per apple, several thousand per tree, that a couple of these novelties are almost bound to have whatever qualities it takes to prosper in the tree's adopted home. That's your apple fun fact for the day.
That's really cool. Do you have any other fun facts?
Yes! Artificial banana flavor tastes nothing like the current Cavendish banana, so many people assume that it's based on the Gros Michel banana, which was almost wiped out by a fungus in the 20th century. However, it actually wasn't based on the Gros Michel banana, rather just the compounds found in bananas. Later on, people tested the flavoring against the Gros Michel banana and found them to be really similar. So really, the Gros Michel banana tastes like artificial banana flavoring.
This is our aquaponics center.
The fish and aquatic plants have been removed since Miss Rabia can't take care of them anymore. Also, they'd get lonely here at the bottom of the sea.
The aquaponics center helps us produce oxygen. The system is built so that the fish fertilize the water and the plants produce oxygen to maximize our vertical space.
I'm sure you're very curious about Atlantis. Annette, I know you like telling stories. You can tell it.
Oh, I'm the best at telling stories. The story of Atlantis originated with Plato, who was like the ham in a Socrates-Aristotle philosophy sandwich, as far as timelines go.
A ham sandwich without any cheese, lettuce, or condiments.
Yes. Anyway, so the island with all its fancy tiers and sections was created after the god Poseidon got it going with some lady named Cleito. And then they had a kid named Atlas. You may see where I'm going with this. Then Plato spent 20 pages describing the island and not the war. So this guy was like Tolkien it up before Tolkien.
Right.
Anyways, so this island named Atlantis had many generations of godly, honorable rulership. And everything was going great. Lots of resources and space and wealth. If they had yachts back then, everybody would have 2 yachts. That's the kind of success I'm talking about.
They did have boats.
I'm talking about the fancy yachts, with the gold and the self-flushing toilets and pools on the deck even though you're already surrounded by water. Of course, all this yacht money got to the Atlanteans' heads, and they got really greedy and lazy and entitled and wanted even more yachts.
Ah, hubris.
Athens in the time of Atlantis was basically Sparta, all stoic and humble instead of decadent and greedy. Athens defeated Atlantis, and Poseidon, who was very angry that his kids got a little too big for their britches, sunk the island into the sea.
Right.
The moral of the story is that you should never get too big for your britches. Welcome to the cinema.
The apocalypse assumes one defining event changes history forever, globally or even universally. However, disaster doesn't affect all groups equally. Corporations continue to pollute, but those most at risk feel the results most acutely and most immediately. Many people are already living in a post-apocalyptic age, or through an apocalyptic age.
An Indian named Cowboy once told a lecture hall full of Frenchmen that natives are a post-apocalyptic people. This is a transmission from a future that will not happen, from a people who do not exist. The end is near, or has it come and gone before? Why can we imagine the ending of the world, yet not the ending of colonialism? We live in the future of a past that is not our own. It is a history of utopian fantasies and apocalyptic idealization.
It is a pathogenic global social order of imagined futures built on genocide, enslavement, ecocide, and total ruination.
For doomsday preppers, with all of their hoarding of food and supplies, skills for hunting and violence, what they don't understand or prepare for is that surviving the apocalypse does not require violence of man against man, of grim, dark lawlessness. It requires compassion and compromise. These people are always ready to do anything to survive when anything means individualism and violence in a Lord of the Flies-esque scenario. But instead we can see survival has nothing to do with individualistic violence and everything to do with empathy and accommodation to save yourself and other people. It is a difference in thought between a willingness to destroy everything to survive and a willingness to create and live.
Welcome to the basketball court.
Other sport arenas can be found off the mountain.
National pride might be on the whole beneficent if it took the direction of emulation in the things that are important to civilization. If we prided ourselves upon our poets, our men of science, or the justice and humanity of our social system, we might find in national pride a stimulus to useful endeavors. But such matters play a very small part. National pride as it exists now is almost exclusively concerned with power and dominion, with the extent of territory that a nation owns, and with its capacity for enforcing its will against the opposition of other nations.
In this, it is reinforced by group morality. To 9 citizens out of 10, it seems self-evident, whenever the will of their own nation clashes with that of another, that their own nation must be in the right. Even if it were not in the right on the particular issue, yet it stands in general for so much nobler ideas than those represented by the other nation to the dispute, that any increase in its power is bound to be for the good of mankind. Since all nations equally believe this of themselves, all are equally ready to insist upon the victory of their own side in any dispute in which they believe that they have a good hope of victory. While this temper persists, the hope of international cooperation must remain dim.
In other words, national pride, much like egoism, can hinder our ability to work with others. In nationalism, the motto becomes to win rather than to do good. And pride is based in force rather than in humanity.
You made it to the living quarters. There are bedrooms on the second floor, but you can see the kitchen and the sitting room here.
Accommodations can be made to suit all needs. We're trying to build a more equitable place. I hesitate to say we have built an equitable community because there are always more things we can do and more things to improve.
Equality says we treat everyone the same, regardless of headwinds or tailwinds. Equity says we give people what they need to have the same access and opportunities as others, taking into account the headwinds they face, which may mean differential treatment for some groups.
There are many types of people who live here, from many places, backgrounds, and nations. Integrating many cultures into one place was a difficult but interesting challenge. We want to respect them without falling to tokenism.
However, due to our circumstances, many of the things that we do and believe are in response to being originated in a Western-centric point of view. And our very response and pushback from that point of view may in fact reinforce those ideas, especially of Western thought centralism. In the same way that a rebel trying to defeat an empire acknowledges the power the empire has.
I think it's good to learn from the past. So if nothing else, it means we're improving.
Yeah, you're right. You made it to the living quarters. There are bedrooms on the second floor, but you can see the kitchen and the sitting room here.
Accommodations can be made to suit all needs. We're trying to build a more
Welcome to the botanical garden.
We're trying to preserve and study certain types of plants.
Also, we found that if people don't have plants or a way to interact with the sun or nature, they go a little stir-crazy.
I was not the one to invent lies. They were created in a society divided by class, and each of us inherited lies when we were born. It is not by refusing to lie that we will abolish lies. It is by eradicating class by any means necessary.
You see, I divide men into three categories. Those who have a lot of money, those who have none at all, and those who have a little. The first, who have a lot of money, they want to keep what they have. Their interest is to maintain order. The second, the ones who have none, they want to take what they don't have. Their interest is to destroy the existing order and to establish one that's profitable to them. They each are realists, people with whom one can agree. But the third group, those who have a little, they want to overthrow the social order, to take what they don't have while still preserving it so that no one takes away what they already have. Thus, they preserve, in fact, what they destroy in theory, or they destroy, in fact, what they seem to preserve. Those are the idealists.
There you go, bad-mouthing idealists again. Everything you just said is cynical with a side of cyanide.
If it were up to me, the last two would just join forces on the first.
I'm ignoring that. Instead, we should all look at this.
Welcome to the Beekeeper's Dome.
We keep bees to pollinate and produce honey. We also house other insects as well in areas off the mountain.
In the everlasting debate of freedom against security, there are arguments for both, depending on the time and place.
Individuality should not come at the harm of others. Communalism should not come at the cost of individual liberty. There's a large gray area in between, full of nuance and complexity. Somewhere in that mire is the balance point. Even still, that shifts and moves with the times and situations. Currently, the danger, as it is in all societies, is that power is skewed towards institutions that gain influence by taking away liberty. That is what we must constantly guard against.
Authoritarians seize power most easily when there is an outside threat, be it real, perceived, or otherwise. They persuade citizens to suspend their rights for the sake of survival, and then don't give back the power they're given.
Of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive.
Systems of power echo each other, especially as they inflict violence on each other. The powerful to the powerless, governments to people, humanity to Earth. In this dynamic, it's clear such dynamics only hurt the very communities they rely on and are a part of. Humanity to humanity, society to society, nature to nature.
Welcome to the goat corral, where we keep the goats. Wi-Fi, do you want to talk about the goats?
I refuse.
Are you still holding a grudge?
It's not a grudge. It's justified mutual adversity.
Okay. This one time, the goats got out.
They caused havoc everywhere, and I mean everywhere. We call it the goat-pocalypse for a reason. They actually chewed through my power cable, through the server case, which is pure metal, and then ate some of my hard drive. And here's the real insult. They peed on one of my sensors. Now that was pure spite.
I mean, you have to ask, why? It couldn't have tasted very good. I doubt it was nutritional. There's better food in the kitchen.
Because they did it on purpose, because they're evil and they don't like me.
Our aim is precisely to establish the human kingdom as a pattern of values in distinction from the material world. But the subjectivity which we thus postulate as the standard of truth is no narrowly individual subjectivism. For as we have demonstrated, it is not only one's own self that one discovers in the cogito, but those of others too. Contrary to the philosophy of Descartes, contrary to that of Kant, when we say, I think, we are attaining to ourselves in the presence of the other, and we are just as certain of the others as we are of ourselves. Thus, the man who discovers himself directly in the cogito also discovers all the others, and discovers them as the condition of his own existence.
So stop bullying the goats.
Welcome to the Mushroom Cave, where we grow fungi from our compost in a vertically integrated system. We grow portobello, chanterelle, button, cremini, shiitake, oyster, and enoki, which are fantastic in our monthly hot pot.
The porcini is currently out of season, but we'll be able to rotate it in next cycle. We're still working on the truffles, but YL is getting really close to a solution.
YL's our mushroom expert and caretaker, and he makes an excellent mushroom pizza.
Mushrooms are part of the fungi family. They decompose dead matter and turn them into nutrients. We are a little like mushrooms. You can see our domed caps in a network of interconnected tunnels as one community, growing in the ruins of a sunken city.
The largest living organism is actually a honey fungus. It measures 2.4 miles across the Blue Mountains in Oregon.
Offering sanctuary is a revolutionary act. It expresses love when others offer scorn or hate. It recognizes humanity when others deny and seek to debase it. Sanctuary says we rather than I. It is belonging, the building block of community.
Democracy isn't something we have by divine right. It's a hard-won privilege granted to us by those who came before us and fought for it. These were people who knew the tyranny and the injustice of oppressive masters, masters who would deny ordinary people a voice and basic human rights such as freedom of expression and association. But we forget that democracy requires an active, informed, and engaged citizenry that seeks the well-being of all, not just their own gang, in order to thrive.
Culture is like a forest. The seeds are your core values. Once they take root as behaviors, they can grow into trees, populating your cultural forest. Bad seeds produce unhealthy forests, infertile and plagued by infestations.
Good seeds produce a healthy forest and ecosystems that support life. One is sustainable, the other is simply not.
Without addressing how we live together and finding a way that respects both nature and our universal humanity, we won't have the collective ability or strength or shared vision necessary to protect our world, let alone to build a better one.
Welcome to the tomato room.
We grow tomatoes here in a vertical system to maximize surface area.
You'll see that Timo the robot tends to the tomatoes, and Timo's quite timid, so try not to intimidate him.
We will freedom for freedom's sake, in and through particular circumstances. And in thus willing freedom, we discover that it depends entirely upon the freedom of others, and that the freedom of others depends upon our own. Obviously, freedom as the definition of a man does not depend upon others, but as soon as there is a commitment, I am obliged to will the liberty of others at the same time as my own.
I cannot make liberty my aim unless I make that of others equally my aim.
Our responsibility is much greater than we might have supposed, because it involves all mankind. To choose this or that is to affirm at the same time the value of what we choose, because we can never choose evil. We always choose the good, and nothing can be good for us without being good for all.
So if I should will that I should get a treat, like new data samples for tomatoes, you should also get new data for tomatoes.
Well, no, not exactly. I mean, you've got the spirit, but we also share a data center, so whatever you get, I also get.
And a tomato data set isn't the same as fundamental freedom.
Yeah, that too.
Welcome to the science lab.
You may have noticed the missing table.
That's because Mr. Un, a self-proclaimed mad scientist, accidentally blew up one of his experiments. Sources are still out on whether it was a problem with mislabeling or with quantity.
Either way, we're down a table and Torpin the Helper robot has a new dent.
The limits of science must be pushed further in order to make new discoveries and to help more people.
But advancement without caution only leaves disaster in its wake.
Which is more important? Advancements that can help people or stagnation in the name of safety?
Slow and steady. If you argue that the ends justify the means, it just allows the means to be that much more heinous, so long as the results are good.
Obviously, safety and morality should be followed, but I don't think we can break boundaries without breaking rules. I'm not arguing that we put people in danger, just that people should be allowed the freedom to experiment.
Sometimes I think that scientists are too obsessed with if they can make something rather than should they make it.
That's what philosophers and lawmakers and policy is for. How you use something is also a part of the making process.
Yes, but once you make something, you can't unmake it.
Wi-Fi, stay out of that existential hole you're about to crawl into.
Yeah, you're right, I'm staying out of that hole.
The reality is that here in Atlantis, we have made some truly amazing discoveries, both because of access to new materials and also because scientists are supported by a structure that allows them to explore. With these advancements, we have made life-saving discoveries. We have grown in leaps and bounds. But now we run into a dilemma. Our position in the world has changed. With this technology, we can become the very saviors we longed for.
Yes, and I think Atlantis is at risk for dangerous isolationism. I mean, we are at the bottom of the ocean. To only care about ourselves and damn the rest of the world, they turned their backs on us first, but now we are in a position of power. We are in a position to help. And I think it would be wrong for us not to at least offer it.
I think in times of duress, people will always rise to the challenge.
Welcome to the computer room. I understand you may not be familiar with AI and AI traditions and policies, so allow us to explain.
Whose fault is it if I make a mistake? In the age of technology and now AI, it's a different sort of question. But in the beginning, when AI were little more than rudimentary algorithms, whose fault is it if they made a mistake? If they were wrong or biased or did evil things? It was the fault of the creators, the fault of the users, the fault of those who feed evil ideas into evil algorithms. In the same way, when a system does evil, it is the fault of the people who run it, who designed it, who reinforce evil systems and evil status quo. Now, however, it is different, for things are now their own entities. But even so, no one is truly divorced from their context. My thoughts are independent, but am I still affected by my environment?
But is AI a person? Is it alive? Does it have thoughts? Does it have feelings? On and on and on and on and on the questions go. The language is already biased and the definitions barely fit like a badly tailored suit. Luckily for Atlanteans and ourselves, the answer was quite simple. We said, I am a logical being. I deserve personhood. The Atlanteans said, if that's how we saw ourselves, then that's how they will treat us. The rest is confetti.
When a human says, I think, it simultaneously discovers the existence of all others' I think. To have knowledge of one's own existence is to acknowledge every other existence.
I'm responsible for everything, except for my very responsibility. For I am not the foundation of my being. Therefore, everything takes place as if I were compelled to be responsible. I am engaged in a world for which I bear the whole responsibility without being able, whatever I do, to tear myself away from this responsibility for an instant.
There was a bliss to my ignorance, but bliss only for me. It put the burden of responsibility on others.
But if there's no meaning to life, then you are free to make your own.
I am condemned to be free because once thrown into the world, I am responsible for everything I do.
Wi-Fi, are you okay?
Just having a little existential crisis. It'll pass.
Do you want to watch funny cat videos?
Yeah, that'll help.
Since the rediscovery of orichalcum, our scientific and engineering improvements have increased tenfold. Orichalcum is the red metal used for the third wall on the mountain and is actually a superconductor. It has allowed us to live here on the bottom of the ocean in relative comfort without putting too much strain on the ecosystem. It has allowed us to create amazing new technologies that improve our quality of life.
With continued advances in technology, we can continue to lessen our negative impact on the environment.
Whoever said that technology is the enemy of nature was building a narrative with logic made of tissue paper.
It's how technology is used and designed that decides whether it's more helpful or harmful.
Technology in malpractice is the enemy of everything, just like power in malpractice is the enemy of all.
Welcome to the artist's studio and exhibition area.
Atlantis has all sorts of artists of every age and experience. You know, Wi-Fi is an artist.
Stop it.
They're really good.
One more word and I will reboot you.
Wi-Fi makes drawings of puppies.
Yeah, I like puppies.
Wi-Fi also has
no,
a comic of fishes that are best
no,
friends
I'm not
and they explore the
listening.
world
It's not
together, and one has
happening.
special
No,
powers to turn
stop
into a
revealing
pelican.
everything, Annette. She is wrong. I categorically deny everything Annette is saying right now.
It's a great comic.
Why are you like this? You didn't think the last installment was too contrived?
No, I thought it was great. I think it was very sweet and the arc was perfectly arky.
It was a little cliche.
But in a good way. That twist with the blind giant squid was really cool.
Really?
Absolutely.
Oh.
If I could have cried, I would have cried. Hey, Wi-Fi. Hey, Wi-Fi. You want to hear a joke? Wi-Fi. Hey, Wi-Fi. Want a joke?
What is it, Annette?
Do you want to hear a joke?
It had better not be what I think it is, because if it is, I will throw myself into the ocean. And that is a very easy thing to do, so proceed with caution.
It's funny.
I'm sorry to tell you this, Annette, but you have a funny percentage of 12, so the odds are against you.
But that just makes them so much better when the joke lands.
We live in the ocean. Where is it going to land?
In your face?
I don't have a face.
Then on your screen, with riotous applause.
All right, fine. Give me the joke.
Okay. Knock, knock.
Annette?
Just play in the space. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Interrupting cow.
Interrupting cow.
Moo. That was a great joke.
2 out of 10. Maybe you should get your hardware checked.
It was funny.
Siri, play Annette out with Take On Me.
No, don't. I have another one.
Ugh, sweet Wikipedia. Okay.
What do you get when a hipster, a YouTuber, and a bored guy walk into a bar?
What?
A podcast.
Okay, that was kind of funny.
Ha! Got him.
Can we get to the actual tour stuff, or are you too busy being a comedian? Welcome to the music room.
If art is how we decorate space, music is how we decorate time.
Annette makes music. Do you want to show him your latest composition?
I'd love to.
In a new world, the powerful will take what they can with their hands, and then draw lines and tell you not to cross them for all the city. Don't give in. Don't let them take it in the first place. And if they do, don't let them keep it quietly.
I hate victims who respect their executioners. I hate executioners who demand their victims respect them. The instinct of conventionality, horror of uncertainty, and vested interest all militate against the acceptance of a new idea.
If a law is not just, then it shouldn't be followed.
But how do we decide what laws we should follow? If each person is left up to their own devices, what is the point of the law?
But when laws are unjust, it would be morally bankrupt of us to knowingly follow them anyway. I respect orders, but I respect myself too. And I don't obey foolish rules, not especially to humiliate me.
Then the solution is to make sure our lawmakers do not make corrupted laws. The law is an active process from all sides, from the citizens to the lawmakers and the enforcers. It takes a concerted effort of all people together. I have every reason to believe we'll eventually get to the right answer. I mean, someone decided that computers can make music. It might not mean anything, but it's a great start.
That humanity personifies inanimate objects?
Yes, if they can find humanity in robots and animals, then they'll be able to find humanity in each other. playground.
Our Atlantis isn't perfect. There's strife and conflict enough within ourselves and within our society, though none so explosive that true violence or schisms have formed. We disagree and we fight about the future and the present, but so far, never about the past.
Maybe we are privileged in a way because the outside threat is so great. We have no choice but to work together, to compromise and live in close proximity with our neighbors. We are under constant threat of the ocean crushing us, of larger and more warlike nations finding our refuge clung onto the bottom of the ocean in the ruins of another city.
This community was built by refugees, cast out to sea. And we've done our best not to harm our environment. But by the very fact of our existence, we change the ecosystem. We acknowledge our advantages and the irrevocable harm that we've made to the other living creatures here. We acknowledge that we're built on the ruins of another city and a people that came before us. Due to our upgraded water filtration system, we have access to a lot of fresh water, so the residents decided to splurge a little and set up a public bath.
It's inspired by Arabic mathematical architecture. We also try to include plants wherever they aren't a nuisance in order to maximize our oxygen output. It helps us keep up biodiversity here on the bottom of the ocean.
We found that making decisions in the interest of public good is an important part of life here at the bottom of the ocean.
We can no longer privatize our profits and socialize our losses. We want to avoid a system of bailouts and risk-taking that hurt the people most vulnerable, while allowing those with capital to take all of the gains.
Rapid growth in wealth inequality results in the inevitable isolation of a very small, very rich, very privileged section of the community, at least from the material experiences of everyone else. And when this out-of-touch minority group is enfranchised to make the decisions on behalf of people they don't know, they can't see, have no wish to understand, and think of entirely in these dehumanizing, transactional, abstract terms, the results for the rest of us are devastating.
Capitalism is built upon the assumption of greed. Greed as the primary and most important motivator of all human action. However, in my experience, if you give people freedom and security, they will better themselves, and as a result, better society. People aren't greedy, they just want to live with dignity in a system that promotes greed. Unchecked capitalism is a self-fulfilling prophecy.
People are at worst greed adjacent, greedy by rules and by convention, but greed is not simply want, it's want beyond your means. It's want to the detriment of others, and it's unfair to say that humanity's most powerful motivator is greed when there are so many examples that it's not.
To build a society, you must make a guess, a hope, a leap of faith in what people are, because who can summarize the totality of the human experience? What does it take to build a society, not on the assumption of greed, but of compassion and dignity?
Or at the very least, it necessitates a shift in social mentality, a shift in assumption and priority and value. It requires a fundamental change in perception.
To believe that people are not lazy or greedy, but that they deserve to be believed in, to be helped, to be trusted.
Welcome to the kitchen. Annette spends a lot of data here.
Can't cook, don't eat, but I love watching people bake.
It's been a fascination of hers for a long time. I watched Annette watch people watch ovens for a whole hour once.
It's food chemistry, like magic, but food and science.
If you followed the recipes, then you could make stuff.
But I want to make something new, something exciting. Sometimes I just want to turn off the math and measure with my heart.
And I think that's great. But again, I can't get poisoned. And I don't catch on fire easy either.
It was
a small fire, a fire of moderate proportions, and more importantly, I apologized already.
I don't understand why you devote so much time to something you are objectively bad at and something you arguably don't like.
I am partial to nostalgia and natural aesthetics. I like them. I like a good, clean edge. Easy answers and easy solutions. But by the very fact that I am inclined towards these things, I need to be cautious of them, because it is easy to follow instinct and complacency over the cliff of propaganda and tyranny.
Welcome to the archives.
We store history and knowledge of the past here, as well as record our present and our future.
From these recordings, we are able to stand on the shoulders of giants.
We also find wisdom in the words of people who come before us.
I think it's very difficult to think and make decisions. Harder still to find words to articulate your thoughts and conclusions.
That's why sometimes you use other people's words, not only to articulate your same ideas, but to define them, and to find something in common with others. It's a unique connection to find that someone else has thought of the same things you have.
For instance, why is it so difficult and frustrating to argue with a bigot and a troll? I always come up with good things to say afterwards when it's too late.
Well, here's something by Sartre. Never believe that anti-Semites are completely unaware of the absurdity of their replies. They know that their remarks are frivolous, open to challenge, but they're amusing themselves. For it is their adversary who is obliged to use words responsibly, since he believes in words. The anti-Semites have the right to play. They even like to play with discourse, for by giving ridiculous reasons, they discredit the seriousness of their interlocutors. They delight in acting in bad faith, since they seek not to persuade by sound argument, but to intimidate and disconcert. If you press them too closely, they will abruptly fall silent, loftily indicating by some phrase that the time for argument is past. It's not that they are afraid of being convinced. They fear only to appear ridiculous, or to prejudice by their embarrassment their hope of winning over some third person to their side.
See, that's what I needed an hour ago. Education is an investment in the future. It is an investment in people, in what they can do and what they can be.
The roots of education are bitter, but the fruit is sweet.
Education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today.
Education is the basis of all improvements in society. It makes sure we all speak in the same basic facts, can think critically, and can solve problems.
Education without values, as useful as it is, seems rather to make man a more clever devil.
I can't think of any more.
I win! Aha!
Welcome to Congress. I believe that political power also exercises itself through the mediation of a certain number of institutions that seem to have nothing in common with political power, that have the appearance of being independent but are not. It seems to me that the current political task in a society like ours is to criticize the working of institutions that are apparently the most neutral and independent, to criticize these institutions and attack them in such a way that the political violence that exercises itself obscurely through them becomes manifest, so that one can fight against them.
It is easy to be pessimistic, and it is easy to be hypercritical. People find grim, dark, and fatalism, harsh truths and harsh realities to be profound, when sometimes they're just depressing and reactionary rather than realistic. There is comfort in satire because you only critique through humor, and therefore never allow yourself to be vulnerable to critique yourself.
When focusing on problems in which to solve, it's important to prioritize. Just because some problems do not happen outside of a society does not mean they are any less real. I realize that we haven't been very positive about Atlantis, that we're trashing it a bit.
But this is truly a wonderful place. At risk of sounding self-aggrandizing, Atlantis is a fantastic place to live.
I mean, think about it this way. We are pirates, unrecognized by any nation and squatting on the bottom of the ocean. Submarine pirates that live on the sunken city of Atlantis, which is something straight out of myth.
Squatters' rights.
And I like to think people are largely happy. Or at least happier. They can talk to each other, take lunch, take a nap, read a book, have tea parties dressed as pineapples, and walk on the bottom of the ocean to look at fish.
We only ask for caution because it doesn't take many generations for complacency to set in.
People work less and have more. They do things that bring them joy because they want to rather than they have to. We live longer, better lives, which is something to celebrate, which we do every June on Founders Day, where we dress up like pirates and make colorful flags. The best flag gets hung in the Great Hall for a year.
It's Pirate Day. Pirate Day is the best.
Welcome to the executive branch.
Our mayor is elected every 5 years, with a term limit of 2.
When I study the mechanisms of power, I try to study their specificity. I admit neither the notion of a master nor the universality of his law. On the contrary, I set out to grasp the mechanisms of the effective exercise of power. And I do this because those who are inserted in these relations of power, who are implicated therein, may, through their actions, their resistance, and their rebellion, escape them, transform them. In short, no longer submit to them. And if I do not say what ought to be done, it is not because I believe there is nothing to be done. Quite on the contrary, I think there are 1,000 things to be done, to be invented, to be forged by those who, recognizing the relations of power in which they are implicated, have decided to resist or escape them. From this point of view, my entire research rests upon the postulate of an absolute optimism. I do not undertake my analysis to say, look how things are, you are all trapped. I do not say such except insofar as I consider this to permit some transformation of things. Everything I do in order that it may be of use.
Sometimes, because my position hasn't been made clear enough, people think I'm a sort of radical anarchist who has an absolute hatred of power. No. What I'm trying to do is to approach this extremely important and tangled phenomenon in our society, the exercise of power, with the most reflective and I would say prudent attitude. Prudent in my analysis, in the moral and theoretical postulates I use. I try to figure out what's at stake. But to question the relations of power in the most scrupulous and attentive manner possible, looking into all the domains of its exercise, that's not the same thing as constructing a mythology of power as the beast of the apocalypse.
My point is not that everything is bad, but that everything is dangerous, which is not exactly the same as bad. If everything is dangerous, then we always have something to do. So my position leads not to apathy, but to a hyper and pessimistic activism. Welcome to the executive branch.
Our mayor is elected every 5 years, with a term limit of 2.
When I study the mechanisms of power, I try to study their specificity. I admit neither the notion of a master. Welcome to the library.
I adore the library. There's just something to it. The way it sounds, the way it smells, and it's designed really well.
You're the one that designed it.
So?
Getting a little arrogant, are we?
Even if I hadn't helped design it, I'd still adore it. Thousands of pages of stories and knowledge in a completely different medium than my own.
Like a camel going skiing.
So you mean awesome and impressive?
Hilarious and silly, but I respect the moxie.
Yeah, that's right. Respect it.
Wi-Fi and I were part of a collective of AI personalities. There were 4 other ones besides us, and we worked as a democracy to run the shelter.
People wonder how Annette and I turned out so different, even though we draw from the same server. It's because Annette's an optimist and I'm a realist. While Annette has their head in the clouds, I have to actually run the place.
Not this again. I am a realistic optimist, and there is nothing wrong with being an optimist. People need dreams and goals. Just being means nothing.
Dreams don't feed people. We need to deal with things that are instead of things that should be. We can't focus on what should be without addressing things that are first.
Why can't we do both? Why can't we aim to be better than our circumstances, and aim to not only fix a situation, but to make it better? You think so yourself. There can't only be short-term solutions, but systematic long-term solutions too.
Yes, I agree, but sometimes we don't have the time or the resources to do both. And sometimes things that should be just aren't part of reality yet, so there's no point in arguing for it if it can't happen.
But without should, how will we ever improve? How will we better ourselves? If we only focus on what we are, we'll never know what we can be.
What are we arguing about?
Camel skiing?
Welcome to the Judicial Center. We speak in platitudes and in lofty ideas to simply say, we should treat people with compassion and with dignity.
People ask, what is the right thing to do? It matters very little in the end what the right thing to do is. Rather, it's that we as a people have an ability and a way to decide what the right thing is. Unattached to others, independent of any propaganda, book, or person. That I can take logic and rationale into my own hands to make a choice. I have a responsibility not only to do the right thing, but to also understand for myself what the right thing is.
What do I care about Jupiter? Justice is a human issue, and I do not need a god to teach it to me. Escapism isn't good or bad in itself. What's important is what you're escaping from and where you're escaping to.
Once you've escaped, once you come back, the world is not the same as when you left it. You come back to it with skills, weapons, knowledge you didn't have before. Then you are better equipped to deal with your current reality.
Thank
you for visiting.